just going to close this up. Hey out there. This is AAM's first live stream here on YouTube. Welcome to all of you animal allies out there to another educational and inspiring AAM program. This presentation, Behind the Lies of Former Zoo Employee, reveals the truth about captivity, is sure to inspire you. You may know that animals held in captivity form abnormal symptoms referred to as zoochosis. These behaviors stem from boredom and depression and frustration, a lack of enrichment and isolation and removal from their natural habitats. So our speaker tonight, Yuri Mitzkewich, will discuss his undercover experiences as a former zoo employee, the truth versus the lies about zoos, the effects of captivity on animals, and how conservation is just an excuse, and of course, what animal advocates can do to save animals and shut down cruel, inhumane zoos and aquariums. And of course, Yuri will be taking your questions as well. So who am I? I'm Michelle Granberg. I get to moderate this wonderful program. I'm a mentor and team member with Animal Activism Mentorship. I'm located in New Jersey. I've been a vegan activist for over 7 years. AAM is a multinational program supporting new and fledgling activists to reach their potential. Our mission is to empower and equip activists to boldly participate in our global animal liberation movement. Founded in 2020, AAM offers a free 3-month mentorship program which pairs experienced activists with aspiring activists. Through one-on-one mentoring, we generate an increased number of effective activists worldwide because we know this movement needs more activists. Additionally, we offer free workshops like this that train and educate our mentors, mentees, and the public. We have a podcast called the Animal Liberation Hour, and we host large-scale in-person activism events all around the country. If you're interested in becoming a mentor or mentee, to apply, visit our website, animalactivismmentorship.com. So that's all the stuff to tell you. Now we get to leap and jump right into the program. I'm going to introduce our presenter for tonight, Yuri Mitzkewich. He's an AAM mentor, an animal rights activist, an organizer with Vegan Outreach. Please hold your questions until we invite them after Yuri's presentation. Feel free to comment in the chat, but as always, keep it respectful. Please be kind to one another. All right, Yuri, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, everybody. This has been a long while in coming for me, so thank you for attending my coming out party. It's good to see how many familiar faces signed up, though. How many friends that are listening, I think, tonight and in support. So yeah, this is the first time in virtually 10 years, really, that publicly I've kind of talked about this. I've talked to a lot of activists over the years behind the scenes and helping them in their work, challenging zoos and aquariums. But this is my first time sort of doing a presentation like this. So yeah, it's been a little while. I'm gonna read some kind of comments that I wrote up to kind of introduce myself and in my past where I worked and whatnot. And then, yeah, we'll open it up and hopefully you all have some great questions. There's a lot to discuss and things that we can all do to help put an end to these places that are exploiting so many animals. So let me get started. Yeah, like I said, it's been about 10 years. I worked most of that time a pretty cushy job for what I've done since then. But I was a county employee as a zookeeper at Zoo Miami from around 2003 till about 2013. And experience at other parks too, and with other campaigns besides that. But that's mostly where I spent most of those years that this experience comes from. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, why the hell would someone want to be a zookeeper? I have to get that out of the way first. It's a fair question. Fair enough. I probably like a lot of you. I don't know how many of you could raise hands real quick, like who had like one time in your lives like ever thought that zoos are doing anything worthwhile, like conservation wise, for helping preserve the future for animals. If it was that many of you. Oh, it's live. I can't see. Okay. Sorry about that.
I'll let you know though if what they say. We got a hand up from Bobby. He says yes.
Okay. Yeah. So did I. They really, these places, spend a lot of money, making us think that what they're doing is legit. If you're familiar with like other animal businesses like Ringling, different circuses and things, like those folks don't have their act together, but zoos, as far as the PR they do, they kind of do. And a lot of people are fooled by like what goes on there, thinking like that the animals are well cared for, and that there's conservation happening that are, just like they say. But like we'll talk about, that's not necessarily so. So yeah, I didn't say my name is Yuri again. For around 15 years, I was a zookeeper over a total. It kind of sounded like an AA meeting intro, but anyway, my first job where I was hired was in South Carolina at the main state zoo there. It was in Columbia, the Riverbanks Zoo. I saw an opening for actually a job in a zoo kitchen where they make and put together all of the food-free animals. And it just kind of, it looked like an interesting job, getting to sort of be on the team that's like making all this work, preserving the future, all these important animal species happen. And that was kind of what got me in the door. In addition to that, I also moved after that job. I moved to Miami. I actually had a short stint at a roadside zoos, like PETA does a lot of focus work on. The one I was at was called Monkey Jungle. A lot of South Florida regulars will know exactly where that is. It's on the level, is very similar to what we're more familiar recently is the aquarium. These places are both at about the same level of what the exploitation that they do and the lack of care that they give to the animals. But yeah, what sort of got me in the door too, like just going back a little bit further, I was very lucky at a young age, having one animal lover in my family. My grandmother Inez on my dad's side was pretty amazing to think about it now, but way back like in the early 1980s, she was aware and was a donor to groups that had just only kind of started that year, like Greenpeace, PETA, Sea Shepherd, actually, which was pretty amazing. I was sort of a military brat at the time. We were living in Spain, and I was seeing these mailers on her kitchen table every time I would visit her in the summer. But they were talking about how this group Sea Shepherd was in the ocean tracking down illegal whaling ships from Spain and actually stopping them in their tracks from like being able to do what they're doing. It just really struck me, and the fact that I could tell my grandmother cared so much about this really drove the point home to me that I ought to pay attention to. So, from that kind of like conservation, saving animals, which directly that's what Sea Shepherd is doing, was kind of how like my forming of a view of what zoos do was had that light at first. But yeah, let me see, the fast forwarding 20 years, I mean, what I actually ended up doing after the zoo kitchen job was direct animal care, or like zookeeping. Like the zookeepers and zoo professionals don't like calling it keeping anymore. It's like, I guess it's trying to make it sound more professional than it really is. But so basically feeding and cleaning animals, like the ones that, because I had come from this place, Monkey Jungle, and had gotten some, just rudimentary experience there, I was able to get a job as a primate zookeeper at Zoo Miami. So, every type of primate you can imagine, African, from Asia, South America, and some, my favorite too, which ended up being chimpanzees and the gorillas, which I ended up having a close relationship with those animals for a few years there, thanks to that. But yeah, I mean, two things happened sort of in my background that sort of changed the whole thing for me. The one of them, the first one was that this is it's a little TMI. I won't talk about it too much, but like a lot of people at the time, or it's at different points in their life, I ended up suffering depression and some anxiety and different issues that around halfway through my zoo career that I ended up seeking out care for, just the typical antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds that I started taking at that time. It didn't end up helping much with all the knuckleheads I was working with, unfortunately. But one good unexpected effect that it did have, these medicines really helped open me up, where before I was scared of tigers, I might have been scared of elephants, rhinos, and gorillas even, that I was feeding every day. This experience, like, somehow removed all the anxiety and fear and apprehension that I had around the animals themselves. So it ended up actually helping a lot in an unexpected way. Whereas I was, nervous and like around them before, which obviously they would sense and not be happy with me, that changed completely. So that was one thing that kind of was important, that helped me change from the viewpoints that I had back then. The second big one was actually a little bit after that, not too much later, 2007. Living in Miami, like I said, working at the zoo there, I saw the news that there was the most recent in a number of marine mammal strandings had happened down in the lower Keys in Florida. There was a beaching of like 30 pilot whales. I don't know if anybody was aware of that at the time. These things would happen occasionally down there. They still, I'm not sure if they know exactly why, but seeing this, and that there was this local group that I got familiar with through the news, was this organization called Marine Mammal Rescue, which was a volunteer group which was showing up down there to try and save as many of the pilot whales as they could. Being that, that I was working at the zoo at that time, and they were looking for help, me and some few zookeepers that I was friends with sought them out, see if we could volunteer if they needed help. And so I ended up going down to the Keys the day right after the news came out about that. Showing up, though, something really struck me right away that I wasn't really anticipating. In addition to the volunteers from this Marine Mammal Rescue group, were these folks from SeaWorld, which is like, they weren't advertised as being a part of this, or like had promoted it, or asked for volunteers on their own in any way. So that was kind of a surprise. Around this time, probably because of Sea Shepherd and other things I was aware of, like that did actually register as like a big red flag for me. I wasn't really sure what that meant, but it's something that I paid attention to. And yeah, so SeaWorld was directing the volunteers, and SeaWorld was even directing this group that was supposedly in charge of the whole thing. So what they told us was that it was a bad situation. The poor pilot whales were stuck in the mangroves, and a lot of them weren't lasting very long. Out of the original 30, only around 7 they told us were going to be able to be saved. It was it was pretty sad situation, but they did what you would expect. They actually, 2 male whales that they had gotten out and got them to recuperate a little bit. They released them. They put trackers on them. They made a big press about this, and like, look at these whales we saved, and they're swimming like 1,000 miles just this week, where the animals in SeaWorld's care, they barely have like the smallest fraction of that amount of space even that they can swim. But yeah, it seemed just really fishy. The whales that they didn't release, though, the ones that we were holding them in the water and trying to keep them calm and stable and covering them with water and basically holding on to them to make sure they didn't flip over again, get water in their blowholes. But out of the 2 that they released, like I mentioned, were males. The 5 that they kept were female. So that kind of like really made kind of clear, like what was going on with this. And it's a sad way that they've kind of like tricked everybody into thinking that they're actually helping these guys when it's all intentional to keep, to never let them go. So that was pretty eye-opening to me, and it was like kind of a key moment where like I got angry enough that I sort of like suddenly was motivated to care. And so it was around then that I began working with some local activists that were trying to expose this, and we found some really good ways to do that. I'd be happy to talk more about that in a few minutes. But yeah, it was this moment of clarity, and that really, like, being a zoo employee and everything, it still reached me. And it was around then that I started doing a lot more for animals than I was. So yeah, it was a really sad situation. Like, these animals living free and everything that humans were saving, air quotes. And for what, it just like at SeaWorld, just like at the zoo, we're keeping these guys on display and, forcing them to go in and out every day, forcing them to come inside at the right time, withholding food from them if they don't if they don't follow what you're trying to get them to do. All kind of messed up stuff. More of that I'll be happy to also go in a little bit, but it just like really struck me all of a sudden. Like, I hadn't seen it before, but after this happened with the whales, it kind of like became, crystal clear. So that's just some background stuff that I wanted to share. First off, there's a lot that I left out. Obviously, that was just kind of the beginning of what I started doing at that time. Since then, I actually got to help out with campaigns that, like, a lot of other local groups down there were doing. The Save Lolita campaign, obviously. Smash Florida HLS was one. The anti-primate testing campaigns that they were doing down there was something I felt very closely with. I worked also with Animal Rights Foundation of Florida. Ended up doing things with Animal Legal Defense Fund. The weekly demos that local activists are still doing and at Sea Aquarium, or that I was involved with the whole time. And thanks to, at least at this point, thanks to my background and like the fact that I still had this zoo ID, really helped me to do some things that get into places and to see things that a lot of people weren't allowed to have access to. So yeah, it's a lot of stuff we can discuss. I would love to get like, to talk about like what's been done, to stop these places and like what we could still do. But yeah, let's talk about some more positive things and what we can do to help these animals.
All right, Yuri, does that mean you were ready for questions,
Yes.
my friend? Are you sure?
Yeah.
All right, ready for Q&A, and Yuri's going to expound from there based on what I already have a million questions that I already wrote down. So I could just take up the whole time. No, and I won't. But any questions, go ahead and put them live in the live chat there. What do y'all want to know or share? Know or share, know or share. And so there's a little bit of a lag while we're waiting. Okay, all right. From our Trey behind the scenes, was there, Yuri, an aha moment when you're working at the zoo, or was it everything piling up?
Yeah, no, great question. Yeah, that's undeniable. There was things stewing in there that were unresolved, that were working internally, that like I was sort of having little aha moments along the way. The one that really was probably the biggest one as far as like getting me to walk out of the door finally there was a day when like the routines for zookeepers, which is like the reason why like they're never going to get the care that they say they're getting there, is that like you may say, like I mentioned that I was feeding and cleaning areas for the gorillas. That's the main area that I liked working, but you have all these other animals and exhibits to care for in addition to them. You're running around pretty much breakneck pace all day because they don't want to hire more than people than they need, like they think. So one day, long story short, as I was finishing up the gorilla area, that they were behind the scenes, like the little cages where they spend like 2/3 of the day, after the zoo closes, and all night long before they're actually allowed to be even outside. I had misplaced a lock, and the gorillas got out, and that was pretty scary. Not for that I was worried of getting hurt or anything, but like scared as far as what that meant was going to happen to them. We're all familiar, what happens to zoo animals most of the time when they're escaped. The zoo security comes out, or the zoo management, and puts them down. And so this suddenly, like, realizing what I had to do, I was thank God I was able to actually just all on my own, without having to call anyone to come out there and take care of it, to get them back where they belong. I got them to go inside on my own. And that was probably my scariest moment in the whole time, in the whole 10 years that I was there. But it really, like, not only made me realize how dangerous it was, that we're responsible for these guys and their safety, and the work that they put you to, like, makes that impossible. But the more and more importantly, just like how amazingly, like, peaceful and non-aggressive and like just like kind these animals really are. I mean, for the first years I was there, like, I had this image of gorillas like that you're seeing in the movies and everything, but that just blew me away, and it really made me realize I had to step it up and do something better for them.
So there's a question as we look to take a deeper dive into this. And I don't know if you're like me, like right now I'm picturing the animals as you're speaking. I can't help but picture zoos in my mind and all these enclosures as we're talking. But there was a question like, what happens to the spring babies they advertise every year? And I was going to ask the same question too. Is there breeding? I know they do breed, but how much breeding did you see in the zoo? How much do you think goes on now? And in what ways are the animals born into captivity versus the ones that got kidnapped from their natural habitat? Did you see any variation in their behaviors? The ones that don't know any different, and the ones that do know, remember their original habitat. What did you see with that?
Yeah, that's a great question also. So they first, what you asked, they definitely do intentionally do breeding. It's for the mentality of the people that work there. This is like a good thing that they're doing, that they don't, they, in their minds, they're not having to take, animals from the wild anymore. That's because they're not allowed to, because, that was forced on them. So they, happily report like every new birth. They control it very scientifically, like who's the mother, the father, and like to try to give them like an optimal healthy start in life. But yeah, we know this isn't the reason. No animal that is ever born in a zoo is ever released at any point or ever will be. So that's the sad truth. And they really sell it well too. Like I mentioned, they got the good advertising. Like people, they really have this mindset. If from the Bible, like the story of like Noah and the ark, every zookeeper thinks that they're on that ark, like caring for those animals, that they're going to be protecting the future for them. And that's amazing. It is to think that it's actually like their identity, of how they see themselves. And so to them, like I said, breeding, it's something good that they're doing. But yeah, there still are cases where like animals are captured from the jungle or the forest, wherever they came from, that where they belong, and still end up in zoos. There's there is still problems with like illegal wildlife trade in capturing wild animals and selling them. A lot of these still do end up in the zoos. They just have to make sure the paperwork is showing that they were confiscated. They and it wasn't the case where they were captured for the zoo. They would cross their T's and dot their I's on that part, but it still happens, obviously. So in my time there, I did see like number of like reptiles, number of like primates that ended up at the zoo that were straight from just a year or two or less, maybe, from where they came from. And you can just picture the trauma of that. For them, it's not many things sadder than that that could happen to these individuals. So the ones that did have the memory of like being free were always different than the ones that were born there. They were always more less wanting to like be around people and to like do what you would try to get them to do, like for veterinary checkups or anything like that. It was always harder with the ones that had this different viewpoint of being themselves before. So yeah, it's a sad thing that still happens to this day, I'm sure.
So we have some good questions coming in as we look further into this. Do animals spend the night in cages? Like, what does the zoo after hours look like? Do they corral them into smaller? Does anybody check on them? Is there someone there 24/7, or do they abandon the animals overnight?
Yeah, right. I mean, so I just alluded to it a little bit earlier, but that's exactly what happens. So for anyone that has been in there, like Zoo Miami is hailed as this kind of like futuristic zoo. There's no cages, air quotes, and basically you walk around and you're looking at the animals like in the open air, like they're living on golf courses, like how it mostly looks. But that's just during open hours. So when the public is allowed in, they're in they're in the outdoors and like, seemingly like enjoying themselves. But yeah, so that's maybe a third of the day, right? If the zoo's open 8 hours, that's the only time those animals are outside, that are allowed to be outside. So when the zoo closes, that's when the zookeepers like time their feeding so that they can just just like Lolita used to do for her for the shows she was made to do. It's all food, that they're getting her to do that with. And that's how the zoos control the animals there too. But yeah, it doesn't even with that, it's doesn't always work where the animals sometimes get to they won't respond or come inside. And most of the time then they get to actually enjoy a night outside. They don't do that for more than a few days because like I mentioned, the food. But yeah, it's a pretty stark difference. I took a lot of photographs in the later years I was there of like the animals in cages and like what this looked like that the public wasn't being shown. Because this was partly in what I was doing with Animal Rights Foundation of Florida. I was giving the photographs to them to use in like presentations at schools, in high schools, in grade schools for kids, to showing them the real story. And it's the difference between like an acre and like probably a 6x6 jail cell. It's that's where they spend almost all their time. So definitely not what the public is being shown. The reality is.
Okay, yeah. So some more great questions coming in. And Trey wanted to know, where do the animals come from that are fed to the carnivorous animals? Are those like frozen body parts that come in, or are they fresh? Or
Yeah, that's both actually. Yeah, there are companies, meat companies that specialized for the zoo industry. One of them, like the main one that Zoo Miami used in is probably the leader in like zoo industry is I think it's called Nebraska Meats, which they do different they have different blocks of meat that they sell that are supposed to be sort of specialized for the individual carnivores diet. This a lot of them, like maybe not all of them, but a lot of them, believe it or not, is actually from horse meat. This is something also that like not many people know about, that zoos are doing. So they, for all the carnivores, the tigers, the hyenas, lions, like the huge number of smaller ones that they feed me to, they buy it mostly all from this place. And smaller animals too, like for the reptile, the reptiles that are in their care, they have to get all these mice, they have to feed them rats, sometimes even sometimes sad as it is, rabbits. And those are probably smaller local companies that they're working with to get that. But it ends up being a lot. You can imagine how much meat a tiger eats every day, and it's all coming from somewhere, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and how abnormal that is, for them not to forage, not to hunt, not to do the things that they would normally do. And it's just crazy. So there was a clarification question. What happens to the surplus of zoo babies? I guess when it comes to breeding, is that an issue?
Right. Yeah. No, sorry, I missed that. Yeah, definitely. So that's one thing that is another hidden thing that goes on at zoos, right? Of course, like you see on the talk shows, you're going to see like baby tigers. That's something that they say they're trying to phase out. Like you don't see them on talk shows and stuff anymore, but it still happens. Of course, there's sort of a regulatory group like it's self-governing for that zoos go under. It's the AZA is like American uh, Zoo and Aquarium Association, something like that. And they have these rules in place supposedly that they're not allowed to use to take the babies out of away from their parents and trot them around like that. But that happens. The other sad thing is like sort of like what I was talking about, that I saw what happened with the pilot whales. They if it's one of the species there that they're really trying to get to breed, more than the others, like whether the babies are born male or female is actually something that can determine how well or if those babies are cared for at all. They want females because they want to continue to be able to breed them. And so there's been times that like I saw or heard from other zookeepers that like a male being born would be neglected, and they wouldn't even get the same, like they wouldn't get veterinary care, where like if it was just born female, they would be all over that, and giving them all the care that they need. So that's another thing that they don't talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, the hidden world, that you're revealing for us. None of us are surprised, I don't think, by what you're saying, but it certainly is validation. So David had asked, did the other zookeepers, zoo employees, see zoochosis as a necessary evil, or did you feel like any of them, like the rare one or two, saw it as wrong? Like, did anybody's conscience at all besides yours like bother them, or not really, or they didn't let on?
Yeah, great question. I mean, that's kind of an open question. I mean, honestly, like you can picture it too, like for people that are working at the zoo, they have this really sort of limited and strict view of like what they're doing and what they're allowed to consider. It's almost like cult like in a way to be working at a zoo and to like see the way people would react and like dismiss some things that they saw that were obviously wrong. It like says, like for instance, like a separate issue, to sort of like air quotes here again, like controlling the health of the animals there. They would regularly catch wild animals living inside the zoo, raccoons or armadillos, anything like this, and they would exterminate them. Right? They just animal living, not hurting anybody. And this is something that regularly happened, and most zookeepers would never say anything about it. That was one of the few instances where I could tell that there was pain behind what they were letting on. It wasn't only me, but there was actually a few other people working there that would regularly go around checking traps and stuff before we left for the day, and would let them go if we found anybody caught in there. And it that happened like for years, but it wasn't still nobody said anything about it. Nobody directly confronted the people that were doing this. So I'm sure, animals like carnivores, especially that have to travel so far, like regularly, they feel the confinement like really intensely. The animals, bears and like foxes, smaller carnivores, those are the ones you can notice them like doing figure eights on their outdoors, even to the point where like there's this dirt path you'll see on a lot of animal exhibits where this is like obvious that's what's happening. Zookeepers will not mention that. They do try to like have it seem that they are doing something about it. There's like rules that like they're probably a term you may or may not know that, you know, they're supposed to do enrichment, like different things that are differences in the exhibit, things they'll introduce to like give the animals something else to interact with that's supposed to magically fix, you know, what's been taken from them, which obviously, right, it doesn't even begin to, but that's how they kind of excuse away that they're doing everything they can, or you know, how they would see it.
Another question is how often and how prevalent are drugs given to them, used to manipulate them or to make them more docile and calm? Are we seeing drugged animals when people go to zoos and they don't realize it? They're also depressed. It's
Right.
hard to tell the difference, or maybe they're drugged because they're depressed, but
Exactly. Yeah. To an extent, yeah, that's definitely something that happens. They, you know, for all the things that they do that are messed up for to the animals, and there's no, you know, way around it. They put a lot of like stress on the individual's health. You know, the veterinary like people at the zoo are some of the most professional probably of any like vet that you would know. It's just so that these like special few animals that they're making money off of don't get sick, right? And so like they won't if they will avoid it if possible to give one of them drugs to deal with something like that. They'll try everything else first to avoid that, but it definitely happens. If animals are put together with, you know, like another of their species that they just don't get along with, that's probably sometimes that happens. They're forced to be together because like there's no space. That's like a situation where I've seen it happen. But yeah, I mean, if a lot of zoo animals, you're going to see them looking like they're depressed and down. It's more just because that's what they are, right? It's not most of the time that they're being drugged. You're just really seeing them like being their honest selves.
Yeah. And another question, I think, again, are injuries, you know, we think about, as they said in the chat, we think about slaughterhouse workers and how they get depressed and how they're prone to injury and they're in harm's way themselves very often with sharp objects and all the machinery there. At zoos, is it common? Did you see it commonly, injuries to workers there? And I know it's making me think of, sometimes it's newsworthy. It makes the news when a zoo worker is sometimes killed or maimed. And even once in a while, there are attendees, people at the zoo who, and usually it's because they antagonize, is what I usually think. They're antagonizing, they're teasing and mocking, and, you know, and then the animal gets blamed for fighting back, attacking, or responding instinctually. So did you see a lot of that?
Yeah, exactly. You know, you would see that on the news sometimes, but that's for sure not because the zoo told anybody about it. Some of the, you know, the working at the sort of fast pace that zookeepers are having to work, especially like at the end of the day, trying to get everybody in a line to clock out at the right time, and you're dealing with these guys are going to do what they want to do, or like not. Obviously, they're going to want to enjoy being outside more, so like they don't want to come in. The the zookeepers are working dangerously a lot of the time. You do see that the injuries from the animals happening a lot because of keeper error. You know, probably for those of you that saw the documentary, Blackfish probably is like the most startling, you know, surprising if you didn't know about it, to see the instances of that where, you know, they're forcing these the whales and dolphins to do these like stupid tricks all day, and you know they're they're right there with the show people. They're not obviously, doing what they're wanting to do there, and so like they will retaliate, and like that movie really made pretty clear that like the zookeepers care, or the dolphin trainer, is they're not really prioritized as far as that they're working safely or not. At the Miami Sea Aquarium, there was rulings from like OSHA even that they wanting to allow the trainers to go inside the water anymore with Toki, and they just continued right on doing things as they always had, and nobody did anything about it. So Sea Aquarium was lucky that nobody had something worse happen to them. But that's a good point. I mean, that's something that like zookeepers won't talk about either. It just is a regular aspect of like the job that things are going to happen, and like they do.
So I think you touched on this, but someone in the chat was asking about zoo accreditation. Like, what's the accrediting body? I'm just kind of curious. And does that create accountability? Do they actually police zoos, or is it up to the customers to report? Can there be whistleblowers within the zoo? I guess that was something that you did with your footage. And then another question was, what are the consequences if there are any? Is it fines or what for disobeying the rules?
Yeah, right. I did allude to it. They do have these governing bodies that like are really just meant to make it look on the level, and that there's like oversight. But definitely from what I saw, and like you would if you do a scan for these type of things in the news, Google search, you're going to see very, very few instances where like anybody has any kind of like repercussions, like for problems at their businesses. Like it is something that like, yeah, we can highlight more. There are like individuals that will make like complaints with USDA. Places like Sea Aquarium had complaints happening left and right all the time, and I don't believe that they were actually an accredited place. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that they were able to ignore all those types of issues they were having for decades. But yeah, it's funny at the Zoo Miami while I was there, there were anonymous individuals making complaints about a lot of issues that were going on at the zoo. Like around that time, like like obviously I would get a lot of like side glances and stuff, like people thinking it was me, but it actually wasn't. There are people that look for those things and can actually, that's one way that I think we can make sure that zoos are doing everything they say they are, or that like at least make it more difficult like for them to continue at the way they are. A really great example of like one nonprofit that actually does this like full time is Sean, which is like Stop Animal Exploitation Now, SAEN. And basically what they do is do scans of like USDA violations, animal care violations that are publicly accessible, that are just online. And if they see that it just being swept under the rug and there's nothing done about it, they actually like will file more complaints and make sure that the issues are like addressed. And they also do a lot, not just zoos, but also with animal labs, where they've been successful in getting just hundreds of thousands of dollars like in fines at these places, just by basically working on their laptops at home. It's a tactic that I think is like probably can be very productive. Mm-hmm. So yeah, for people, even visitors, seeing something, or like if you hear about something, I would look it up and to see like what you can find out more about it. It's definitely a great way to keep the pressure on these places.
Yeah, I'm glad you're going into that part of it now so that we can start to feel some hope around this. But in terms of what actions are effective in your opinion, or what you've seen, what successes or wins there have been, and is the goal to shut down the zoos? Is, should we be going for the large donors and the corporate backing in all of this? I know that I recently went to a demo at the Philadelphia Zoo, which some folks are discussing in the chat, with changethezoo.com, and their approach is to sway them to change to an ecosystem based model rather than a zoo model, where the animal is more like a sanctuary and more natural in that way. So and folks in the chat are welcome to share what, again, your wins and your successes and even the actions that you're currently involved in.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought that up too. Philadelphia Zoo is probably, you could be seen as one of the worst in the country. They're one of the oldest zoos in the country, so they have the most antiquated cells and cages that they keep the animals in. Even their outdoor exhibits are most of the time just atrocious, because they were constructed in this time when people didn't even think about these things, or have any consciousness about like what the animals or their experiences are that be having to be there. So yeah, it's great to hear that y'all were, I did see the event, and like they saw some pictures of it. That's something that I would like tell, I would think is actually a good idea, that more people could do that, getting attention from the local media on these places, and like showing the customers that this isn't right. It's something that they've been doing great work over the years at Miami Sea Aquarium, every weekend coming out there and like just standing at the entrance with our signs, and handing leaflets to all the cars we can get to slow down, and pleading with them to turn around. Almost every weekend that the folks are out there for the 2 hours that those demos usually go on, they're successful in like lowering their profits for that day by thousands of dollars. Just like a couple dozen cars that don't enter the park because you're out there is like, it's causing a lot of financial pressure on them. So that's something that I would definitely encourage like more of. I joined the protest like anytime I have the chance, like at Sea Aquarium. I've over the years been out there a lot. It definitely works. I mean, it's kind of an awareness and growing like public consciousness for this issue, and getting the the awareness that fighting against what these zoos and aquariums are telling people, and like promoting on their advertisements and in the news and everything. And yeah, it's having consequences. I mean, you probably seen there's been zoos that have been forced, like when they have like a lone elephant, say like living by itself because his partner passed away, or something like that. And it's obvious that, they're suffering too, just being alone day after day after day. And the activists have, focusing on that issue, and like, promoting, like doing something better for that one animal does make a difference. There's been zoos that have been forced to actually retire elephants to a sanctuary. There's elephant sanctuaries in Tennessee and Florida that they've successfully gotten elephants to be able to retire to an actual sanctuary by pressuring these zoos. So that's something, yeah, definitely. I mean, from other groups too, like that I was involved with, I would like for specifically like Smash HLS. That's a Stop Hunting in Life Sciences, which is anti-vivisection campaign that was happening about a decade ago, and the tactics that they used were really successful. Doing home demos, like you said, Michelle, like focusing on the businesses that are supporting. That have like major donations going to like the place, where you are. Those are really great things to consider, and to like research more, and like who you might be able to pressure to stop supporting the zoo. these, they get a lot of visitors, but these are really the major donors that keep them growing and pulling off this whole charade. So doing a couple of these tactics, I think, is probably the best way to get started.
Yeah, so some of the same approach as we're doing with the animal agriculture industry, which is encouraging consumers to boycott, certainly that's definitely something we can do. And maybe it's a state by state thing sometimes, because I know state by state, when it comes to circuses, that some states have banned exotic animals, at least from circuses. We have that here in New Jersey, but that's New Jersey,
Okay,
so.
yeah, that's one big sign, I think, that that we are seeing change, right? Like whoever thought 5 years ago that Ringling Brothers wouldn't be around right now, right? And whoever thought that SeaWorld would make some public announcement that they will not be after this, the orcas that they have are no longer around, that they're not going to have orcas anymore. It's something they would never even admitted to until just recently. And from working at the zoo and from knowing all these people that are in there, they see these things happening to these other businesses, and they almost have this kind of real fear that they're the next in line. You really can sense this reluctance around when they see news of anything positive happening, the circus closing or SeaWorld being forced to change the way that they do business. I think they really do feel like they're next. And if on some level they didn't know what they were doing was wrong, as hard as they tried not to think about it, that's really a sign that the word is getting out there, and public opinion is definitely changing. It's if you just look at how the change has been in the last 10 years, that's just night and day. And we're definitely on the right way to making this happen. It takes sustained effort and a lot of folks doing things local in their areas to help out and to let the people in their communities know. But there's lots of ways to do that, and it's working. It's a long strategy, but it's in these places that have been operating for decades, you got to do what you can.
Yeah, this is a marathon, not a sprint. We're trying to change mass consciousness. That's what we're about. There was another clarifying question about the zoo babies. Are they sold to the black market for food, or do you know?
Right. Yeah, it does. Right. So that is kind of one instance where the governing bodies that the bigger zoos all go by have had to change what they were doing and not allow that to happen anymore. That being said, there's a lot of places that look like a upstanding professional zoo that aren't accredited that most definitely do that. There's my experience with that is been from a sanctuary that is in Florida. There's a few sanctuaries for great apes, chimpanzee sanctuaries, and the only U.S. sanctuary for orangutans is in Central Florida, called the Center for Great Apes. Back when they were first getting started, the first few orangutans and chimpanzees they rescued were actually taken from that situation where in Miami it used to be called the Parajungle, the privately owned, they all doing all the things to make it seem like they're educating the public and doing something worthwhile. As soon as the babies got to be big enough, they most definitely were sold. There was instances and individuals that I know that are some of the lucky ones that are living a good life at the center, that were rescued from these kind of situations. So even if a bigger zoo maybe isn't doing this anymore, there's plenty of places that are. And it's definitely worth, it's a good place to focus. They could, yeah, the without any oversight at all, the shady, things are happening.
So Yuri, can you define what conservation is, what it actually is? Good conservation, not fake conservation. I mean, I'm thinking, I can't help but think about our lovely Jane Goodall right now, like her work, and she's vegan, obviously. Her work is amazing, off the charts, and she's still doing it. So what is conservation that we can actually support?
Right. There are a lot of places that are, groups, nonprofits that are doing amazing work. And believe it or not, like some actually are being supported by zoos. They want to focus in on like the conservation that they are doing. That's all they advertise. So you would assume that's like what they're doing 24/7. But the actual, if you look at the financial contribution that zoos put into actual real conservation, protecting animals in their habitats, wild, where they belong, it across the board, it's less than 1% of their revenue that they bring in, the millions and millions and millions every year. So most definitely, it's just, I'm sure their advertising budgets are more than the amount they're spending on the conservation itself. So there's great organizations that are doing real conservation. Still, Paul Watson is out there, fighting and really laser focused on like ending whaling. And part of what he's done a lot in the past too is against like what's happening, for instance, like in Japan, Taiji, right, where they have these dolphin hunts and are selling dolphins still to this day to aquariums. And so organizations like his, there's nonprofits across the board, like Jane Goodall herself actually has like a number of sanctuaries and conservation projects that she's helped start up across Africa. A few of them like focus on chimpanzees, obviously, but if in the areas, in the wild areas they've been able to protect, it's protecting all the animals in there. So it's real conservation. And other organizations, if those of you that saw the movie Game Changers, you might remember that there was the individual in there who had run an anti-poaching operation in South Africa, which was pretty amazing. He all vegan also, which is a new thing that they added to go the extra mile. But any group like that that's like forcing the protection of the animals, which nobody else is doing, obviously, like there's a lot of them out there that are like that are worth supporting, but that's what it has to involve. It has to be saving the animals where they are, saving their homes, saving their jungles, and saving their lives in the ocean, like stopping these horrific practices that were still going on.
Thank you. Yeah, so I apologize if I've missed any questions. Go ahead and put them into the chat again, or any additional questions. But also, I know that probably most of us or all of us here are not welfareists. We don't want better cages. Obviously we want them to remain free and we're abolitionists. But there was a time, I think, when I was growing up, where zoos did make some kind of drastic shift from those more small barred cages to, I guess, what they call enclosures. How do they, behind the scenes, build the enclosures, think of the enclosures? How do they sort of envision that?
Yeah, that's kind of a sign right there, like how far general consciousness is sort of like tilted against them. Really, when they're planning any kind of new construction that they're doing for like back when I was there, Zoo Miami had this whole Florida wildlife new multi-acre area they wanted to build that they were going to be spending a ton of money on. From the design aspect there, like it most obviously was like, how do we make the public look at this and think it's an issue, right? So like, newer zoos are under the influence of that, and so like more and more they're trying to do things that are open air, or really lush. Like anybody that's ever been to Disney, and they have a zoo there called Animal Kingdom. They have done an amazing job, like making the lush enclosures and the landscaping, make it actually look like the gorillas are on a mountainside and all that. And it's for those few individuals.
Prison, yeah.
Yeah. So it's definitely, that's one instance where you see like we are getting somewhere. They can't build that cage anymore. And at the zoo too, you would still see it with the people that had been working there, that were there 30, 40 years. It just, their mentality towards the animal themselves, you could see a difference compared to the younger folks who would, as the conundrum we all know, like animal lovers that love one animal, right? And like zookeepers were a perfect example of that, where they were laser focused on, like, how much they sacrifice caring for this zebra. And it's like all their lives are, surrounding it and everything, but that they're not really actually, doing much in helping their future and like for the zebras in the wild. But zoos aren't able to do the things that they used to be able to do. It's a good sign. I mean, that's, reading into it, you really see that that's indicative of like where things are headed.
Absolutely. We'll take it. We'll take all of that, but we'll keep pushing for better. But it's making me think, again, when I grew up, we used to go to Great Adventure in New Jersey, and they had the safari. Like, they changed the name. It's not a zoo, it's a safari. And yes, you could drive through in your car and the animals would come, right? Has anybody else remember those? Like the safari near you? Even the giraffes, now they don't have that anymore because it's dangerous for the animals. But they would come up to the car, or the monkeys would be climbing all over your car. And we thought, oh my God, this is great. They're free. They're fine. It's a safari. And yet it's still within the context, of course, of captivity. But I'm wondering if you can tell us maybe about a couple of specific species of animals that we always typically see in a zoo and how it affects them, especially like elephants, for example, one of the biggest animals there are. I think I read that in the wild, they'll walk all day, right? They'll just walk and walk and walk for miles in the wild, and in tightly knit social groups. I guess they're called herds, or maybe they're called something else when it comes to elephants, and they can't do that. And how that makes that species even more zoochosis, crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of you can only imagine, right? I mean, like, imagine yourself that, not in jail, or like, pretty much basically, right? I mean, it comes down to it, what they are. Zoo animals didn't commit any crime to be there. But yeah, they're living in this, the space for us, that would be like, in an elevator for 16 hours a day, and just being allowed out for a couple hours into like a smaller little entrance, office or something, and never getting out of that, never in some cases never seeing another person. You can imagine. I mean, we're kind of, humans are, we're really limited as far as like what we think animals are experiencing. That's something that I learned only from being close with animals and being around them as long as I was those years. But if you go to like Zoo Miami had an elephant enclosure. There was two, which were open air. There's no bars or anything like that. There was like a patch of dirt surrounded by moats which were specifically designed so that from the public's area where they would be looking at the elephants, you wouldn't see the moats. So it looked like there was just this, they had this huge open space behind them that maybe they could wander and walk back there. But no, it was probably like a half acre tops. And for the, like you said, Michelle, like the animals that like roam for, some of them, I believe, like in different parts of Africa for hundreds of miles,
Mhm.
and for animal that, for that they have that drive and that normal instinct, you can, it's clear as day to me, that they have to be suffering like intensely, and like they do, like a lot of times, like in we were talking about like zoo employees being injured and everything, and a lot of those injuries do come from elephants because they're just like so frustrated and so like sick of the same thing every day being done to them. Elephants are one of the ones, like, thankfully, even someone that's not an animal activist a lot of times will walk up to an exhibit and look at like where the elephants are being kept there, and like to them they don't have any reason to defend it, so they can see like very much more clearly that's not right, and that that's not how they were meant to live. So yeah, I mean, thankfully a couple zoos have been pressured to either build larger areas for them, and like thankfully a couple of like elephants that were turned, surrendered to sanctuaries. That's been happening, more and more, especially recently. Yeah.
Yeah, you would think it doesn't take much for anybody to sort of put yourself in their place, and see it through their eyes. And that's what I was trying to tell people when we were doing some outreach outside of the Philadelphia Zoo, just for a moment, see it through their eyes. So how about the primates? What happens to them, since they're like our closest cousins? Talk about just like us,
Yeah.
anything special come up with them?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are all kind of issues. I mean, they're sort of more like, we see them as being intelligent because we could sort of like, we could read, their emotions more easily, and like, and picture what they're going through and what they're feeling. All animals obviously that are experiencing that, but a lot of times, because of who they are, they're more subjected to actually like things from the public that are in the zoos, that are there to be entertained, right? They paid their money, and like, why is the gorilla taking a nap right now? Like, that's not what I wanted, like I was expecting, or and people throwing things at the animals, people a lot of times like throwing food at them, trying to get them to just get up and do something. So they're subjected to probably more of that than the elephants might be, or like zebras or other herbivores like that. They don't get messed with as much. So it happens across the board. A lot of animals where you'll see people yelling at them, clapping their hands. For a couple of times, there's even been instances where attackers have escaped and attacked people because they were being taunted that way. And the primates, it was practically a daily thing. There were on weekends when there was more people in there, but it happened all the time. So to add to everything else, that they're like confined, that they're being forced to go in and out every day, that things are never getting better for them. They have to deal with these people, clapping and being a nuisance, and like just messing with them all day long. It was pretty bad. It's something that they the zoos won't do anything about either, because they want the people in the door. So like they never do anything about those things. Yeah, it is infuriating to see close up, believe me.
Oh my God, I can imagine going in there every day, or however often you worked, and being surrounded in that and be exposed to that. and I'm not surprised that how it affected you negatively, but here you are, an animal rights activist at the same time. Do you know any stories, or in general, the lucky zoo animals that are surrendered or released or gotten to go to sanctuary, do they ever recover from zoochosis? Do they ever, I mean, they're never the same, I imagine, but I imagine they do open up and thrive somewhat if that is, if that's the circumstance.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I'm like struggling to kind of think of instances where I've seen that any animal is actually like taken out and like put it in a better situation. They definitely happen. There are like public like some zoos that very few and far between that are kind of like only exhibiting animals that are injured and like wouldn't be able to like live in the wild and everything, and like that's their heart is in the right place, I guess. It's definitely better than what we're talking about, but how if someone was rescued from like a wildlife trafficker or something like that, that's more the case where you're going to see the like some type of effort to get them back to where they came from. Looking for examples of like what you were asking though, like one of the rare cases where this was done was in Costa Rica, not too far away, where actually like the government ended up making some type of law where no animal was allowed to be taken from the jungle and placed in a zoo anymore. So like they were basically phasing out all the zoos in the country. And at that time they did like re-release like some carnivores. I don't like maybe they panthers or some type of carnivores that they had like locally there. They did actually re-release them, but yeah, that's not a regular. It's not a thing that happens in the U.S. or at least in other countries. Maybe if folks know of examples, you can bring it up. You could mention it, but yeah.
Do you recommend that people try to take footage of what they see? I mean, undercover footage, I'm sure, is hard to get unless you're on the inside of things. And if so, who they were reported to again, or what would they do, or with it? What did you do?
Oh, totally. Yeah. So it's interesting. There's actually ways that you can get behind the scenes at zoos. Like these places really aren't very like security minded as far as like the public being highlighting any other problems like that. They really think they're really like kind of that untouchable still, that they you can go to a zoo and they have a lot of times they'll have behind the scenes tours where you can sign up and like have a zookeeper or a more normally it's like a zoo volunteer that will give you kind of a guided tour of like the night cages or different areas where the animal goes off when the public's not there. And so that's actually that's something. I mean, I don't know if it'd be good to pay and give the zoo any money to have that opportunity. I mean, but if it's a place that you really think like that the things are looking bad and that it would be worthwhile, that's something that I think that it would be good doing. It's nobody giving you a tour is going to suspect anything or any, at all like that. They encourage people to take photos when they're doing these things. So yeah, I mean, someplace like Philadelphia Zoo, if they do tours like that, that's something that I think could actually really be worthwhile. But yeah, there's you can file complaints and these things that you see with like USDA. The oversight committees that zoos belong to aren't going to do anything about it, but there's a long history of like people like bringing things to the attention of the authorities and getting fines or getting, forcing something to be done about it. So if you're there and you see something that doesn't look right, I mean, definitely document it. Nobody's going to look at you like, why are you taking a picture or anything? Like, that's like, most of the visitors in there every day. So that's something I would definitely encourage for sure.
So I know we mentioned Lolita already, and I know you don't have necessarily, you have some knowledge beyond what maybe the rest of us have. And I know that you participated over the years in actions there, and there's just been this collective outpouring of sadness that it has touched. We're always touched when animals perish. So unnecessary, and so is there anything we can learn from that? Is there anything we can take away, another takeaway from that? Or is there something more that you can share?
Yeah. There definitely, that was a rough one, like before the call I mentioned, like I'm basically the same age as Toki, like just like a few months. And what always struck me about like what was being done to her there was that, for all the years that I've been alive and I've been able to travel, see the world and like have all these great experiences and everything, for each of those years she was there in that same tank, right? The smallest tank in the country wasn't even legal size that was that the organizing oversight bodies like their standards that they set. So for all these years she was made to be in there direct under the sunlight, all day long, every day, subject to hurricanes, sometimes even rolling over there, which that's something else that zoos, could be presented with, is like, what are they doing for climate change or something, right? A couple more feet of sea level rise and the sea aquarium not going to be there anyway. And these places have no plans for animals to be saved, to be like taken to safety. It's another thing that we're putting them through. So yeah, that's something that I think in her case that it got a lot of people thinking more about this, right? The outpouring that I saw after what happened, not just me, but so many of my vegan friends, not even all of them activists, that just were touched by this. It's in a way, it's kind of instructive in that really it did affect people, that we were focusing their attention on this one individual all these years, and what she was experiencing and what this park was doing to her. And really there's a lot of animals that live at Sea Aquarium, and they're all in like substandard, like horrible, like living situations. But focusing on her in her care all these years really did affect the public, really did affect like the consciousness of people in our thinking of what we're actually doing here, that maybe we were raised to thinking was like no big deal, but that a lot of us understand are understanding better now that it's not right. And so that's as sad as the news was recently, I think like that's one thing that it really showed the work that all the activists that were doing, that focusing on that over the years unstoppingly, it just it did really help, I think. And it's also, it may be instructive too that we should have maybe done a little more other things to pressure them. There was a couple times that a group of activists went to the owner's house and actually brought the neighbors attention that this guy is living here and this is what he does, this is how he makes his money. And maybe more of that would have helped. I mean, the guy, he was one of 3 owners of Sea Aquarium, so maybe even that like pressured him to sell and get out of there. but so I think that's it's why different tactics and ways of approaching this are good to think about. The number of things that can be tried are really limitless. The fact that if maybe you think of something it's never been done before, great. I mean, like that's awesome. We need to be working more creatively and really putting effort, into this and like doing different things. I think it could really help.
Yeah. So we'll be wrapping up, not yet, but shortly, but we'll do just a couple more questions sort of quickly. But one was around, when you were there at the zoo, did you see mostly families with kids again? And should we approach it when I was doing the leafletting at Philadelphia Zoo just a couple of weeks ago, it was lots of kids coming and going. And one of the parents took their time to come over to me and say, you shouldn't be doing this because of the kids. You shouldn't be saying this because the kids will hear it, as if it's better to hide from them, right? Or as if they're not already instinctually seeing. It's more the parents' projection, right? But what do you say about that, I guess?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's something that you see regularly. I see aquarium. The parents would occasionally get pretty rude with us about it, and exhibiting behaviors that really you're doing that in front of your kids. Forget what we're sharing the truth, with them about. And it's one of the things that definitely I'm happy to see that you were doing that and that you were able to get kids to kind of to think a little more on that, is that's the indoctrination that we really need to challenge. I mean, it's that they're raised to think this is no big deal is really what is keeping these places going. If they were really mission oriented, wanting to solve conservation issues and to teach future generations that they need to really care about animals in their wild and where they belong, they wouldn't be approaching it all the way that they're putting them on exhibit and forcing them to do things. And it's kind of casing the message in this double message where protect, help us protect gorillas, while they're here stuck in this cage. If you go to older zoos, you're still seeing them in there. So what is that teaching kids? They really mixed, conflicting messages, and that's messing them up, potentially for their lives. So, for sure, if you're out there and you're raising awareness, at the zoo, be very conscious of the message that the children are saying also. That's something that it's really good to have maybe some signs that are really basic and just straight to the message, so that they even understand. How many times at Sea Aquarium we were being passed by cars where the kids were just glued to the windows, reading all of our signs and trying to take it all in. Having that message put in front of them directly, you don't know. There's definitely more outlandish examples I've seen of what a small little influence and introduction of an idea can blossom into, planting the seed, like we say. So yeah, I'm happy to see it. I mean, parents are just obviously trying not to, they don't want to be confronted with what they're doing in the moment either.
Yeah, maybe if they do say something, those could be our future, leaders in this movement, our future, activism. But people tend to continue the denial and turning away, which continues the normalization of animal exploitation. Saying nothing is being complicit. It's normalizing, it's desensitizing over and over most people to this. Animals as entertainment, animals as property, animals as commodities. Of course, that's what they're here for. So I think we're going to get to wrapping up, Yuri, but before we do, I'm going to sort of ask you a final kind of question I like to ask, which is basically, this is heartbreaking stuff. So can you leave us even again a little note of hope? Like, what's your hope for a vegan world, or what's your vision for a vegan world, or where do you think in the big picture all this could be heading?
Yeah, right. I mean, it's thankfully, I've been at this long enough now where I've been able to see change happening. I mean, in the wider consciousness of like the public, with the zoos, like it's obviously been much more like prevalent. It's much more irregular now. If you're seeing a zoo story in the newspaper or something, you're going to see comments in the comments section that are like from regular people that are like, really, and just being very open, and like telling it like it is. And a couple of years ago, that's not something that I saw too much. I mean, there's an animal save group in Miami. That's something I also like for a number of years that I've gone out with them, and you would see it in the Miami Herald, the major like South Florida newspaper, and the way that they would cover this, not even zoos and aquariums, but something even more basic like where our food comes from. And yeah, at the very first year, I remember reading the online story and looking at the comments section and kind of like not being very happy and like the very unevolved comments that people were leaving. And in the small space of like just every year seeing the difference happen to where like 3-4 years later the comment section was like 50-50, whereas before it was just like complete washout. People saying that what you're doing is ridiculous, like in all the basic rude comments we're all familiar with. So it's definitely, like you said at the beginning, we have to keep reminding ourselves it's a marathon, right? If we're just trying to sprint it, we're not going to be able to keep doing everything we can for the long term. And that's very important. I mean, what we're doing is very influential, and it's it's having real world effects. We don't see it in front of us every day and hear about it, but once you're doing this, for extended time, you're going to begin seeing like you actually are having results, and like together, that's the thing to remember too, is like as activists, we're not just one person where we live doing this. So we're actually like, a part of this massive movement across the world of people taking action and making a difference. So yeah, remember the marathon part of this, and pace yourself. It's worthwhile, and like you're not replaceable, so don't burn out.
Long haul. Great reminder, Yuri, that this is a social justice movement. Nothing happens overnight, and this is their movement. This is really the animals' movements. We are just the carriers of that movement. So thank you so much. We're going to leave it there. Hang on, folks, and thank you all for joining us. But just a couple of quick AAM announcements before we go. And please share this video with people. We really appreciate that. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel. But we will be doing more of these live streams with our workshops and other, online events. On October 12th, for example, we're going to have Donnie Moore with his successful grassroots pressure campaigns workshop. So we'll be live for that. Also, please consider becoming a patron by finding AAM on Patreon. Your donations allow AAM to continue to provide free educational resources for activists, which ultimately saves more animals. And that wraps up another AAM workshop. Thank you, Yuri, so much for your time and wisdom. Thank you so much. And thank you all for being here and for the tireless work you're doing for the animals. Again, if you're interested in becoming an AAM mentor or a mentee, or want to get involved, if you'd like to present a workshop even, if you'd like to be on our email newsletter list, you can drop your email to me privately, if that's something we can do. I don't know if we can do that through YouTube. But until next time, That's all, folks. Let's see your V. Oh, we can't see your V. Let's see our Vs. V for vegan. Stay strong and live vegan, everyone. Ciao. Thanks, Yuri.
You're welcome. See y'all.